Yes.
You were married. So how did you meet your husband? He was already a novelist?
No. Well, Charles hired me.
Well, there heavens. This is
right,
all different.
Straight out of college. In fact, he hired me for a job in Boston. He was here in New York, and I went to work in Boston. But I was working on a project called Juno, which he founded as part of, which is the free internet email service. And I came on because I'd done a lot of programming at that point just for fun. I had both like the communication skills and the technical skills, and I ended up running our the support for our beta test over there. And then at that point, but I sort of worked there in the Boston office for a year. Sorry, this is so like autobiographical, but it's I worked there for a year and discovered that I wanted to go back to school for computer science. And I basically asked, can I come back and work part-time in New York and go back to school? And they let me do that because there was a great company to work for. And
had a good boss.
Yeah, well, and then who was it? Charles's assistant at the time organized an informal like scuba diving trip. There were a bunch of scuba divers in the office, and they were like, we should all go together, because this was in fact, when you're straight out of college, I was working like 60, 80-hour weeks, everybody was in the office all the time. It was that startup culture. But so it was, so a bunch of us are all going to the Bahamas. Anybody who wants to can join in, can come in and come. And I was like, well, I can't scuba dive, but I like the idea of going to the Bahamas and sitting on the beach and read. And in fact, that was literally the exact same thought that went through Charles's head. So we both ended up on the beach, and he was reading Cornell Woolrich, and I was reading John Donne. and yeah,
the rest is history.
The rest is history. And yeah, so he actually, as you probably know, went on to found Hard Case Crime,
right?
Which is pulp novels, and he introduced me to my agent, who was his first boss when he was, I think, 17. He went to work for Asimov's.
Oh, wow.
And the editor at the time was Cynthia Manson, who is now a literary agent, and it represents me. So
did he introduce you as friends, or were you?
Yes, no, we were friends.
Oh, yeah.
She was at our wedding. And
so
it was literally, that was 1999. We got married in 2004. I had a manuscript, and I had 55,000 words of it, literally, and I sent it to her.
How many
and I
pages
said,
is that?
55,000
words.
Well, the books, the Temporary books are all roughly 100 to 120,000.
So it's about half of the book.
Yeah, it's about half the book. And so I sent it to her, and was like, do you think this is saleable? And she herself did not represent science fiction and fantasy, oddly, because she'd kind of been an editor in that field. She kind of made a deliberate decision. She didn't want to say no to her friends, right? So she went. So she deliberately sort of eschewed science fiction and fantasy for a while. But we were two good friends. She couldn't say no to it. So she actually she took it to her friend Betsy Mitchell, who was the editor-in-chief at Del Rey. Mm-hmm. And Betsy basically said, "Can I?" And it took a while because but it took like a few months. I was still writing the book.
That's not a while, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, people, whenever I'm at a convention, someone's like, "So how did you break into the industry?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you don't want to hear my story because it's just everything.
It's useless for you."
Yeah, stars align. It's basically like, well, find a guy whose first boss knows the editor of Del Rey, and marry him. And that, it's like step one.
Yeah.
Step two, profit, right? But basically, so she took it to Betsy, and Betsy said, "I love it. Where's the rest? And can I have 2 more?"